Apparently, my father had a half-sister. The sister died suddenly a few months after she was born. No one knows what caused it. The long-awaited daughter had died, and her grandmother was very depressed. My grandfather couldn't stand the sight of her and bought a French doll for my aunt, who named it Chizue, the same name as her sister, and adored it. She petted it every day, kept it close, cleaned it up, and slept with it. It was changed when my sister was born. My aunt was so happy when a girl was born. My parents both worked, and my aunt raised my sister with great affection. I was also loved by my aunt. So, Chizue's place, which had been cherished until now, became not at her aunt's bedside, but in the Buddha's room. It's a completely empty Buddha's room. I used to be sent there to exchange flowers before dinner to greet my ancestors. Dark, damp, cold, creepy room. When I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I went into the Buddhist room to exchange flowers as usual and put my hands together. That's when I felt like someone was standing behind me. I turned around and there was nothing there. Just Chizue in her pink dress, as usual. That was strangely scary at the time, and it was also an impressionable time, so I couldn't help but think, what the hell, you got a problem with me, come at me. I provoked Chizue. I was an idiot. I went back to the living room and told my family about it. Chizue stared at me, and my grandmother was furious. Never before or since has my grandmother been that angry. As well as his angry grandmother, his father was furious and beat me. I cried. At that time, I apologized, and that was it. The problem came up a few days later. It was a vacation, or maybe it was still light, and the Buddhist room was rather bright. When I entered the Buddhist room to take down the flowers, I forgot the change last night. Chizue was not in her place. It fell off the shelf where she always keeps it and went to the tatami. Its wrist was dislocated. I honestly thought it crawled out to do something to me. I was so freaked out that I ran and went to the living room with my family, and my grandmother was there. I thought she might be mad at me, but I was really scared of something, so I reported it. My grandmother, perhaps concerned by my unusual appearance, came to the Buddhist room with me. Then Chizue was in place this time. Her wrist was also in place. I felt like I was lying, but while I was excusing, my father came to me and said, "Oh, sorry, I dropped that." It was my dad. My dad laughed at me when I was half crying because of the misunderstanding, and my grandmother comforted me this time, and we got through it. But that night, after my grandmother went to bed, my dad came to my room. That doll in the daylight. Actually, I put it back, but I didn't drop it. You're not lying for sure? Referring to my father's story, he saw me coming out of the Buddhist room making loud noises, and when he looked into the Buddhist room to see what was wrong, he found Chizue had fallen. He told me that he quietly fixed it because it would be bad if someone was discovered. The only creepy thing is that my dad said its wrists were not off. How did it fall and how did the wrists attach? I got so scared that I started skipping, replacing the flowers. I got out to the Buddhist room with flowers and waited in the guest room. Then I went back to the living room. I probably didn't exchange the flowers for about 6 months because I secretly replaced them with artificial ones and no one noticed that. Around that time, my sister died. Not long after she started elementary school. The cause of the death was high fever of unknown origin. Suddenly she had a fever, was hospitalized, and never saw her again. I thought maybe it was because I was skipping the flower exchange, but I couldn't tell my parents or my grandmother about it. I felt guilty. I thought it was my fault that my sister died. My mother began to say that my sister died because of Chizue. When I asked her about it, she said that my sister, at the time of her death, cried, "Chizue," and cried. Chizue was not my sister's friend. And if I can think of one, it was that weird doll. Maybe it was because of my past fussiness. But the mother also became very sensitive and said, "I'll throw away the doll." We had a big fight during my sister's funeral. After this one incident, our parents did not get along, and the mother went back to her parents' house. My father worked silently, and my grandmother cried every night while holding Chizue. My dad never came home from work. My grandmother cried all the time. And around this time, I started doing the housework. Next, my grandmother's dementia set in. Looking back now, it's no wonder. She either ate dinner or locked herself in a room and sprawled out while holding the doors, crying and crying. When she was tired of crying, she went to bed. It was hard after my grandmother became demented. When I went to call her, "Dinner's ready," she was eating something yet. "What are you eating?" I asked her. And she said, "Rice." "What?" I looked at my grandmother's face and saw golden threads coming out of her mouth. And in my grandmother's hands is a half-peeled Chizue. I think this was the scariest time for me. I immediately made my grandmother spit it out. When I talked to my mother about it, she said she didn't care of such and such person. I told my father and told him to take her to the hospital. But he says he can't take her because he's too busy working and it's my job to take care of her. I was still in elementary school at the time. Since my sister died, my family has gone crazy. I figured it was my fault for not doing the flower exchange. But I had to do it. So I was so busy taking care of my grandmother that I didn't go to school in middle school. Chizue was in tatters by the hands of a grandmother. The hair was pulled out, the clothes removed, and remutilated. It sounded dirty, but it was even smeared with the poop. Even though I felt sorry for it and took it away from her, my grandmother had it the next day. I hid it in all kinds of places, such as the bathroom cabinet, in my parents' bedroom, and in the shoe closet. She seems to wander around the house at night, moaning and groaning, to find Chizue. And she rips Chizue to shreds again. I couldn't help it, so I decided to leave it in my room to try it out. It was the middle of the night, or maybe just after 3 a.m. The sounds of my grandmother searching for Chizue woke me up. My room is on the 2nd floor, and she hasn't been up there since she got demented. With peace in mind, I looked at the closet where I had stored Chizue and noticed the door was open, even though I had closed it. I mean, it would have been weird to have it in plain sight. I put it in a closet so I wouldn't have to look at it at night. I also covered it with plastic just in case. But the vinyl is just falling on the floor. I was panicked. Waterfall sweat under me. Should I pretend to be asleep or get up and check? Whatever. I was scared of. Then I heard a creak and a noise, the sound of a door opening. And then, out of the blue, I heard a voice. Chizue, I didn't know you were here. My grandmother climbed up, and I jumped up at the moment. But there was nothing there. Neither Chizue nor her grandmother. I was so scared that I decided to go straight to bed. I decided to go back to sleep and pretend it was all in my head. The next morning, I found my grandma dead in her room. The cause of death was asphyxiation. In her throat was Chizue's hair and its torn clothes and its eyeballs, and in her mouth was Chizue's head. I know that's hard to swallow. My grandmother is dying like that, in a bright room with lots of sun shining in. Instead of a happy face, she looked like she had suffered bloodshot eyes, incontinence, and a tight grip on Chizue's torso in one hand. My grandmother's funeral was a simple one. It was cremation. Chizue was also burned together. When you put someone in the tombs, you see the names of the ancestors of the past generation on the tombs. It was already written there as Chizue, which seemed odd. Here's the scary part of the story. The name Chizue is actually the name of my father's half-sister, and the cause of death was not actually unexplained. My grandmother apparently killed her by squeezing her neck. I don't know why. Well, I thought I didn't have any relatives on my father's side. It's because my grandmother was insulated. This is a story of a relative who came to the funeral. When I asked why she wasn't arrested, they wouldn't answer. Perhaps the whole family hid the murder. This year marks the 4th anniversary of her death. I didn't go to school. I didn't do anything. I have been unmotivated ever since my grandmother died. I even want to die like this. I'm so tired. If everything that has happened up to now is Chizue-san's curse, then maybe this state of mind is too. Maybe Chizue has been trying to destroy the family, including me. It's kind of funny to think so.